Word to the cloud. All right. So today's special guest is none other than the one, the only Michael Farrington, or as you may know him, Michael Force. Michael is a longtime Salesforce MVP, one of the first 500 certified, and responsible for 1% of all of installs on the Exchange push. Sales line one number, but in the view of things, right, and all the installs, that's quite a bit. And he's also the creator and author behind michaelforce.org, which, if you haven't been out there and seen some of the excellent videos that Michael's produced, you should definitely do that. And you should also follow him on Twitter. And Michael Force. Michael, would you please introduce yourself? Say hello to the crowd.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, hello, crowd. Yeah, Jared, let me know if you can't hear me. But if if you couldn't hear me, you wouldn't have just heard that, so we have a problem. But if I appreciate the intro, and I am honored to be here on the call. It's funny, like when you invited me to be on, I thought the initial thought that I had was like, I don't know anything, like, and the reason I say that is that, so I've been doing this for 12 years. I've been working on the platform for a long time, like since before it was a platform. I like to say I kind of grew up with the platform, and, like we didn't do Apex Code back then because there was no such thing as Apex Code. But what I've learned all along is that when people would ask me questions, or people would, like in a meeting, somebody would say, hey, is this possible with Salesforce? My initial reaction is always, well, I think it's like a very political answer. It's like, I think that it might be, but I'll have to double check. And the reason that I've been like trained to do that is because as soon as you think you know something, then a new release comes out and it changes, or something big comes out, like, Lightning Experience, and everything changes. And so, for me, it's like, or in a forum like this, I might think I know the answer, but it doesn't apply to every edition of Salesforce or something like that. So I've just learned to accept that I'm ignorant, and just, like everything I know is in Google, you know what I mean? But I'm going to do my best to help people out here, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. All right. Well, everyone, now that we have affirmed Michael is on and we can hear him, let's go ahead and open up for questions here. And I'm going to start real quick with a couple of people who are all over it within the chat. D. Huss has a question. I'm not sure if you know this one, Michael. The question there is, does Lightning have approvals covered yet? And I'm guessing, D, you're asking, Can you use approvals in Lightning?
And it looks like you can. I dug up a help file. Let me drop the link into the chat. That might help. It looks like like most things with Lightning Experience, there is not yet parity, so there's going to be some discrepancies of what you can and can't do. And it seems like that link right there kind of lets you know exactly what the gaps are, but it's one of those where, for sure, experimentation is your best friend. Like if you go in, anytime, I used to actually kind of like laugh at, over the years, like if I'd be kind of helping somebody out, whether they were, new to Salesforce or an intern or something like that, and they would come and ask me if something can be done or can't be done. My initial response was always like, I don't know, because of what I just said a few minutes ago. I'd say, yeah, it sounds like it probably can, but just try it out. Like, did you even just go into a sandbox and like screw around with it, and you'll find that, I mean, there's a release coming out, like, literally with, depending on what server you're on, it's coming out any day now, but it's like, so this article could change even.
Good stuff. Yeah, no, that's definitely a good thing to check out. So John Graff also has a question in here. Although, John, maybe you want to speak up on this one because I'm not sure it's necessarily a question or more of a statement. But John's basically saying, is there a way, or have you thought of a way, Michael, to merge permission sets? So the volume of permission sets is, getting crazy. Thoughts on like a way to kind of to merge those together as opposed to, I guess, deleting one and.
Yeah, that kind of came to my head just as I was sitting here and reviewing another permission set, and I noticed that they consistently are on the same people, and it'd be great if they were all together as one, because they've been encouraging us to use more permission sets, but now it's getting a little bit out of hand, at least in my own personal org. I thought that would be a fun idea if there was a way to do that.
Well, that's a good question. So I know that through the traditional SOAP API, you can access certain things about permission sets, and permission sets are really like a subset of profiles now. It's like the data model there is a little bit confusing to me, at least last time I dug into it, and so there are certain things that you can pull out pretty easily, and that would just be like the actual permissions that they have granted, or like the high level like object CRUD, stuff like that you can get up pretty easily. But then when you get down into the weeds of like, okay, on each object, which fields can they see? That's where it gets pretty hairy. And so like what I did when I was comparing some, it was actually profiles, but I think the same thing would work for permission sets. You could actually get a lot of info out just through like the data loader. You can get at least some basic info about, like high level permissions and things. And then you would be able to kind of eyeball and see like which ones are possibly similar and maybe, redundant, if that's, kind of your exercise. And that's what I did with profiles about like a year ago when I was cleaning up a new org. But, well, it's not a new org, but it was new to me. And so that's probably step one. But then when you get past that, if you need like field level security or anything more intricate, there was an app. I'm going to try to see if I can find it real quick. There was an AppExchange app that I used it was not great, but it was really the only thing out there that could even get into that level of field level security. It was a little bit kludgy, but it did end up helping me. So let me try to see if I can figure out what that was. It might have been the permissioner.
That's a great app that has come up before.
Yeah, I'd have to. Let me make a note. I might have to circle back and maybe post the link to whatever the app was that I used, if I can figure it out. I'll try to post
Sweet.
it. I guess, Jared, that's a good question. Logistically, how do we follow up afterwards? Should I just post in the office hours community group?
Yeah, that's perfect.
That's helpful. Thank you very much.
All right, no worries.
So, Michael, this next one is real quick, is more of a just a shout out. Someone just, well, not just someone, Chandler Anderson put in the chat your Opportunity product shopping cart app was the first solution she installed at her first company, and customizing was her first major Apex Visualforce project, and that company is still using it, and she just wanted to say thank you. So we'll pat on the back for that one. I do love that one as well.
Yeah, no, seriously. This is Chandler, and yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, we still use that. I like added all kinds of custom features to it for my company, and yeah, it was just like so awesome to find, because I'm sure people are aware that the standard opportunity products process isn't very flexible. So it's definitely a great resource for people like me who just had like an org that expected a lot more out of the standard one and just needed something special. So yeah, I appreciate that you giving it away for free and letting people customize it.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for that shout out, and I'm glad that my code is helping people. And I mean, it's funny, like I have a big ego. I like to brag about like my, you know, like 1% of downloads on the App Exchange are my apps or whatever. But that one is not even included in that. It's more like I just posted it because I thought it was some neat code and whatever. And it turns out I get that a lot where people will come up and be like, you know, your App Exchange apps are cool and all, but like I really love the code that you shared with me because I was able to like customize it and do my own thing. And like, and I won't dominate the call with my anecdotes, but this one is pretty funny. So right now I work at Domo, and the guy who brought me in, and I'm in operations, you know, so I represent us as a customer to Salesforce, if you will, not the partner end. So I'm actually consuming Salesforce as an admin and developer for our own use. And the guy who brought me in, he's like a friend of mine. He was my new manager when I got hired. He knew that, you know, I have skills and I've got a reputation and all that. But then it really kind of set in when one day he was like searching for something like a better way to enter products, and he came across my blog post. so he called me up and he's like, yeah, so I installed some code today and turns out it was some stuff that you wrote. So, you know, thanks. I'm like, all right, cool. I'm already pulling my own weight and I just got hired. So it's, yeah, thanks for that. If you know, let me know if you have any questions, or it'd be cool to kind of, I thought about like, you know, maybe putting it on like GitHub or something like that, let people contribute to it. So.
Nice.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
So this is kind of a good follow-up question. A familiar face, Michael, our friend Amanda Nelson, is on and asked a question. She says, you've built, you know, a hugely popular App Exchange app. What was your thinking when building it? And what do you think others can do to build helpful apps?
So that's a good question. So hello, Amanda. It's good to hear from you virtually. And and Amanda can like keep me honest. I keep telling her that like, you know, that the App Exchange should like brag or somehow back me up that, you know, about my 1% claim, because it is pretty, you know, ridiculous. But so she could confirm or deny that maybe. But the question is a good one. So like the reason that I posted my 2 free apps on the App Exchange, right? So Drag and Roll was the first one, and then Field Trip was the second one. The only reason that I posted them was because I wanted to learn. So I have like a coding background, but I had never really done a lot of web development. And then you know, S controls were like the only way that you could customize Salesforce, like really customize it back in the day. And so I took the time to learn JavaScript, and like my way of learning is to build something and just trial and error and all that. And so I built Drag and Roll and for my own use, and it turned out so good that I wanted, you know, to get credit for it and people to see it and, you know, think that, you know, I knew what I was doing and, you know, build my resume, et cetera, et cetera. And so I posted it for free, and then and that one really is like open, you know, it's like open source because you can just right click and say view source and you see all my code when you install it. And so that's all it was about. It was just me learning and then trying to like brag to the world that I could build something. And then Field Trip was the same thing. It's like, okay, I had an idea how to use this brand new feature called Batch Apex, but it wasn't, you know, I had never really worked with it. And so that was like my way of learning and figuring it out. And then once I released the app, it was like my shoddy code was apparently dominating the Salesforce servers with, you know, like it was a very popular app, but I had not written it very well. So it was like, you know, I got a call from Salesforce saying, hey, can we talk about like how you run this batch process, because it is not efficient. And so it really did turn out to be a great way to learn, because I ended up learning from like experts at Salesforce, like how Batch Apex works and all that stuff. So.
Nice. That's great. That's great. Awesome. All right. So I don't see any other questions in the chat. Who else has a question? Feel free to speak up or raise your hand in the meeting and we'll go there.
I'll fill some dead space here while we get our next question. I've got, I don't know if people have heard of my cigar shindig that happens at the end of Dreamforce. And if you're not going to Dreamforce, I apologize that I'm doing this plug, and it probably stings a little to, to hear about Dreamforce every time that if you're not going. But the party happens at the end of the conference, the last night, and it's the 7th time that we're doing it. And I've just confirmed recently with both the venue and with Domo, who is my sponsor, that we're going to be throwing the party again. So make sure it's unofficial right now. The registration page is not open or anything, but, this is my first public announcement that, get ready for it and put it on your calendar. You'll be there, right, Jared?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. All right. Who has a question? If nobody has a question, I will ask a question kind of related to your apps, right? So, what are you working on? Bringing Field Trip and your other apps over into the Lightning experience? Are you just kind of leaving them for now? Same thing with, have you thought about with like the opportunity, products cart, right? Have you thought about, at some point bringing that and making that a Lightning component?
Yeah, there are a lot of different thoughts that I'm having now. Like, all right, I've done kind of like a proof of concept for the last decade that okay, there are some ideas that are very popular, right? Like I can a fun quote that I heard from somebody who I used to work for. It was mostly an investor, but businessman as well, and he told me that I was really good at giving away apps, but I was crap at selling them. And so it really got me thinking. I'm like, that's totally true. It's like, it really is a different ballgame. It's like to create something that has enough value where people install it and use it, versus okay, they're going to actually do whatever, maybe a free trial, but then they're going to have to buck up and, pull out the credit card or go through the PO process or whatever. Even if it's just a cent, it's like a totally different world. It just is just the nature of it. And, so I've been kind of happy with what I've been doing in my career, but there is definitely that, that need to say well, I got to at least give it a go and say, all right, there's got to be some ideas that I can put out there and charge for. And so I've been knocking around a few different ideas, and I'm just kind of curious if the funny part is that, so what we've talked about so far, what I've been able to talk about and what came up was okay, there are the free admin tools that people seem to like and they get installed a lot. But as you can see, there's when I go into the Sales Cloud and do a little something, I come up with a little widget or whatever it is, that's very well received too. So it's kind of it's a tough call to say, all right, do I stick to admin tools or do I move into a new space? And, so I'm being a little bit candid here, with my thoughts on the roadmap and all that stuff. But yeah, I don't know. Might have to do some surveying, and see just have to decide that, where's the biggest competition going to be, or where's the worst risk of, becoming obsolete because Salesforce puts out some functionality. So there's a lot to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we do have another good question here, Michael, and this one is around multi-org strategy. So, and Gavin, feel free to chime in here. So Gavin has a question. He's a business analyst, and their company has 3 our organization has 3 orgs, and so one of those is the enterprise org, and then he's got 2 other orgs, and he he's got a goal of turning the enterprise org into kind of the mothership, and then connecting all the other orgs to it. However, building these uniformed apps on the enterprise org has been a challenge because each school has their own unique process. But if they build their apps in each own org, they lose the benefit of enterprise licenses, etc. So, is there any way to kind of what's your thoughts on using something like Salesforce Connect? Obviously, Salesforce Connect has Salesforce and Salesforce kind of built in there now, or Informatica or MuleSoft to connect basically this hub and spoke methodology. I guess in general, Michael, it sounds like what are your thoughts around doing multi-org type strategies?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I know that I guess I'll just kind of pick these off in the order that my brain comes up with something to say. But the first I would say about the double licensing costs is, so I've been in that situation where it's for about 7 years I was a system admin at Motorola, and we were really good at acquisitions. And so every time you think that your world was simple and streamlined and all that, then we'd acquire another company that would have their own Salesforce org. And sometimes we could bring them into our org and absorb it and all that. And sometimes you couldn't. And when you couldn't, then it was what we would do, and maybe this is just kind of a benefit of a larger company, just kind of, I don't know what their policies are, they being Salesforce. I don't know what the policies are in these kind of negotiations, but I know that, we were able to negotiate down to say, look, the reality is we're going to have users who have a login to both, what can you do for us, and that kind of thing. But so beyond pricing though, it's technically how do you handle that? I'm not familiar with the third parties like Informatica or MuleSoft or anything, but there are some clever ways to, if you just needed to send messages from one org to another, or even open up a simple API, if you had some Apex code or something, you want to open it up in a REST API and then call it from the other org. I've done things like that, and you can absolutely do that if you have a developer who knows those sort of things, as kind of a it's a native way of doing it, right? And then the problem with, because it sounds like what you're saying, so the repetitive setup work, that is going to be, there are some tools where, obviously change sets are not going to work, right? Because they only go from sandbox to production or whatever, they're all linked. But if you want to go from one org to another, there are tools you can use to do that. Developer, most of them are developer tools. They're not going to be user-friendly tools like change sets are. But if you had something where some of the things are going to be able to be sucked into the Eclipse IDE or whatever it is, and then at that point they're really just kind of a bunch of files, right? XML files and all that, and you can move those wherever you want that way. Or if you needed to, you could use packaging, but I don't really recommend that for this use case. I don't know if anything I'm saying is helpful, because it's just really it is a messy situation, and it's there's not going to be a silver bullet, and some of it is going to if you want the same thing in 2 orgs, then there's just not I don't know, Jared, maybe you have better ideas, but there's no silver bullet.
Yeah, really. Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of different ways to handle it, and as Michael said, right, you can certainly, you try to package things up, but that could also, lead to issues. And then, if you change it right now, you've got to basically, repackage it up and create a new version and then redeploy it in that org. So you kind of have to take it almost on an individual basis in my mind, right, on each of the different pieces of functionality, et cetera. As far as you're talking from a pure data standpoint, certainly, Salesforce Connect obviously is something to consider, given with the Salesforce now baked in there. But yeah, I agree with all that you said there, Michael. So hopefully, Gavin, that was somewhat helpful. But yeah, as Michael said, there's really no silver bullet there. All right, we have a question from Steve Dodd here. And his question is, Mike, any plans to revive the Salesforce Admin Hack series? I really enjoyed watching those years ago when I was first learning Salesforce.
Well, I guess the call for paper is open right now at Dreamforce. What do you think, Jared? Should we go one more time around and put together some brand new hacks?
I think it's worth it. Yeah, I think we do it. So Steve, I guess to answer your question, there are plans, just not sure how complete those plans are.
Yeah, and it's funny, like when we started doing that, it was kind of like hack was like a big buzzword, and I think people are kind of like getting a little bit tired of it. That's just, I don't know, maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just getting tired of it. I'm projecting that on everybody, but it's but yeah, I kind of don't care. It'd be good to revive it, and we could come up with some clever. I'll talk to Amanda. Maybe she can help me figure out some clever way to rebrand it or something. But yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, let's plan on it. All right, Chandler has a question in the chat. Chandler, do you just want to go ahead and speak up and ask this one?
Yeah, I'm doing a Salesforce integration with one of a partner company, and they provide a partner WSDL, and we're using SOAP currently to log into their Salesforce and just get that session ID to use their own Apex APIs that we're connecting to. But it's just putting in their partner WSDL into our org, and it's super huge and long for just like another Salesforce org. And in doing that, it seems like there's probably an easier way to log in to Salesforce using Apex rather than just using SOAP and the SOAP to WSDL tools. I mean, is there like a really foolproof way of doing it through REST that's pretty simple, as opposed to having to use SOAP to WSDL or whatever to log in?
Yeah, I don't see why not. Like, I mean, REST for sure. The REST API is not bad to work with at all. Like for logging in and you could definitely get a session ID that way, like a lot easier than you could through SOAP API. And it's been a long time since I made calls from one org to another that way, like with REST. But it was. And actually, yeah, you know what I did was I used unauthenticated. It was actually like you can use Sites technology to kind of publicly open certain things, but you don't even need to be logged in. You can actually make a call to the API, which is kind of neat. But but if you did want the authentication and all that, yeah, you would just have like that. Go to your create apps, and then there's like connected apps, I think they call it. And you have, if you already have one for like a REST API or whatever, you need that little client ID and the secret, and then you can go into your other org, and there's definitely like code out there, like people have done that. Like if you just kind of Google up I want to call one org from another org, and what happens is you would actually need like all four things. You need the client ID, the secret, and the username and the password of whatever user you're trying to get a session for, and then you kind of would throw that at the REST API of the other org, and you probably need my domain turned on to do that. But it's like you throw all that at the other org, and then the other org would spit you right back a session ID. So it would be, building a REST a class to handle those REST calls and all that from scratch would be not terrible. but I don't even think you'd have to do that. Like there's definitely people out there who've done it. You'd probably just copy and paste some stuff.
Yeah, I'll do some more research. I know this is like another company's work, so they're just giving us like a community license. Basically, we're using the login. So I might do some more research using the connected app thing you're saying, and just doing it through that. I've done mostly worked with SOAP APIs. I haven't done as much with REST at my current company, but definitely that's a good step in the right direction. Is just kind of start looking into that. So it makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I don't know. You know, I mean, that stuff like that, it gets pretty complicated pretty quick, and so you know, I think on a call like this, especially where I'm just kind of shooting from the hip, it's hard to guide you. But feel free to reach out if you have like, you know, any follow-up questions.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's hard to get a catch-all for everything, so I know there's so many different customizations you can do. So yeah, I guess that, you know, it's one of those things where I'm thinking like, man, it should be just that easy to just log into another Salesforce using Apex, but you know, it's just another web service you're logging into. You know, it's just another thing you're connecting to. It's not special because it's Salesforce, unless you're using that Salesforce to Salesforce connector, which we're not using for this. But yeah, it's interesting. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, Salesforce obviously they want from a technical point of view, it's good that like the Salesforce REST API is, you know, standardized. It's similar to like, you know, other REST APIs out there. So like when I'm working with our engineers at Domo and they're trying to like make a call to the REST API, like they know generally how to do it. So that's the good part. But the bad part is, like, to your point, there's no, like, they didn't make any special connectors or whatever to make it easier for if you happen to be calling from Salesforce to Salesforce. It's still like, you know, it's as hard as if you're calling some other third-party REST API.
Yeah, makes sense.
Nice. All right. Who else has a question?
All right, Jared, I'll ask you questions. You work with a lot of customers, and I think you're well versed on a variety of different use cases and all. Like, what's the Lightning experience adoption? Like, what's the state of the union of like adoption of the new experience from your point of view? Is it like a lot of people, the majority of customers you see are like, you know, what bucket do they fall into? Like it's not even like on their radar, or it is on their radar, but it's like a huge effort. And then you know, or there's people who are like kind of already switching over some profiles, and then there's some people who have done it and just across the board.
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, I feel like you have just a couple buckets of people, right? You certainly have, you know, brand new to Salesforce. You have, you know, hey, I've been using Salesforce for maybe a couple years, and then you have really, you know, older orgs that have a lot of legacy configuration and code and whatever it may be, right? So on the new side, right, that is at the forefront of pretty much every new customer, someone who's new to Salesforce. That's at the forefront, right? They're going in saying we're going to use Lightning. We're, you know, not really considering anything else. And then you have kind of that middle tier there that we definitely are seeing more and more clients come to us and say, hey, you know, we really need help kind of migrating over to Lightning, moving some of this legacy code, and potentially redoing some configuration. And we try to, you know, walk them through that, right? Do an inventory of things. But yeah, I mean, there's definite interest there. A lot of people have it on the radar. And then same thing and I would say the same goes for those older legacy orgs, right, that have been around for a long time and have even more, code and configuration to move over, it's definitely high on the radar. There's a lot of, questions around it, a lot of, hey, I'm, got this to move. What's the best way to move it, right? And so, trying to help clients to move through that is just the biggest part of it. Because, right, a biggest part of it is you really just got to take inventory of what you have and start to say, okay, how am I going to move this? If it's truly, things that, you really need to move. Then you also have, some new layouts, right, to set up on the Lightning page and Lightning app builder. So, but yeah, it's definitely at the forefront. We hear, it's something we hear quite a lot of. So, I'm curious. I'll also answer your question at the end here with another question for you, Michael. Of, from a Lightning, how much have you gotten into, Lightning development? And, what would your recommendation be for maybe, Visualforce Apex coders and how they, transition a lot of their knowledge to some of the newer stuff that you can do within Lightning?
Yeah, I would say that, like, from what I've seen, it's some Visualforce pages will just work, and that's really cool. So you can tell that, like, okay, they put thought into this new technology, and they didn't want to, like, totally whatever, like, leave you in the dust. Like with S controls, it was kind of the same way, right? Like, actually, Amanda knows that I was trying to upgrade this Dragon Roll recently, like do change some things in there, release version 1.5, and it's totally developed now, but I can't release it because you're not allowed to have S controls in managed packages on the App Exchange anymore as of like February. So I just barely missed the cutoff. So it's like, so I can't even upgrade, my old code. But when they made that switch from S controls to Visualforce, you could take that JavaScript and you could kind of copy it and paste it into a Visualforce page, and for the most part, it would work. And that's kind of the same thing now that from my experience, is like, okay, cool. Well, a lot of Visualforce pages can work, and there's actually a good. I've only got like 1 or 2 badges on Trailhead. I know I'm terrible. I really need to go back to school and, like, do some of that, just brush up on things at the very least. But it's like on one of the badges that I have was actually really good info about how to use the two together, like when to use Visualforce and when to use the Lightning components. And there really is a lot of, like, synergy between the two. And a lot of your old Visualforce pages, you'll be surprised that, like, they still work and all that. But that being said, it's kind of like, okay, well, it does put a lot of emphasis on skills of, if somebody's out there, like, trying to hire somebody to, manage their Salesforce org, or they themselves are just trying to gear their education, or, whatever it is, or you're bringing on consultants and you want to ask, okay, what are your skills? Then it puts a lot more emphasis on just general web development, and that specific, combined with that specific information, like knowledge of how Lightning components work, right? Or like Aura components, or whatever they were called previously, and so it's in that regard, it's kind of a cool thing, because then if you're saying, previously it was like, okay, well, if I'm a developer and I have no idea, I've never written Visualforce or Apex, then I was a little bit lost. I mean, I could do, maybe I'm a web developer, and so yeah, that's a big part of it. But I think now it's an even bigger part of it. It's probably, the key takeaway. So it's like, you got web developers, or it's easier for them to get in the game, I think. So I forgot what the question was, but I just talked a lot. So there you go.
Nice. No, that's good. That's good. All right, we got a couple posts in the chat here. Let me just read through them, make sure we're good. Yeah, Chandler and John kind of on the Lightning front, just the same kind of sentiment, right? Just trying to figure out time and the time it's going to take to kind of start getting the ball rolling and, retraining users and getting them over to Lightning, et cetera. All right. Doesn't look like any other questions there. All right. Who else has a question? We've got about 5 minutes left before we need to wrap up. Anybody else have another question for Michael? Or Mike, do you have anything that like anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, and maybe just for fun, I'll share like a deep thought I had the other day. See what you guys think. I was like, it was just it's kind of interesting, this like paradigm shift that is being caused by Einstein. And the way I was kind of thinking about it, which is kind of funny, is like like I said years ago, it was like, okay, admins were in control of Salesforce, right? And you'd be able to say like, okay, cool. So like I go and I'll create a field and I'll create a page layout. I'm in control. And then sometimes you'd go and rely on a developer and the developer or a third party, right? You get an app in there or something like that. And you'd be like, okay, you'd lose a little bit of control because now you're looking at the developer like, okay, how does it calculate this? And how does it figure out that and all that stuff? And then the developer would kind of at some point have to just be like, well, I'll document it as best I can and I'll do this and I'll do that. But in the end, it's like, you got to just trust me. It's gonna do what you want it to do and you just need to trust me. And now it's just funny because like developers are being put in that same position by Einstein, because they're saying like, okay, well, I'm going to go and use these cool new features where I can throw things at Einstein and tell it to learn and whatever. But how does it really work, right? And now they're looking at like Einstein, like, okay, well, how is it going to know? Like, how is it going to give me answers? And Einstein is looking at them and saying like, well, at some point you got to just trust. And so I don't know. I just thought it was kind of like being, as a developer, being in that position, you're like, I don't know if I like that. But I think the more we start playing around with Einstein, and I have done very little of it, but I think we'll be, it's exciting. We live in exciting times, for sure.
Nice, love it. Great. Awesome. Well, let's see here. Just gonna check the chat. All right, cool. Well, we'll go ahead and stop it there. Mike, I want to thank you for your time, expertise, and just all you obviously contribute to the community. I appreciate you jumping on the call today, and we'll look forward to having you back on.
Yeah, right on. Thanks for having me, and I'll try to keep an eye on that in the community, on that group. So everyone, if you're not a member of the Office Hours group in the community, search for it and join it, and you can ask me any questions afterwards.
Awesome. All right, so our next call is coming up July 7th. Hopefully some of you will be in town. If not, this is a great way to cap off your July 4th week. So you can take it from the beach, from the lake, wherever you may be. But we have John Graff, who's going to be our special guest for this call. So we're looking forward to having John on. He's been on community or MVP Office Hours quite a few times, helping out people. So we're excited to have John on here. He's been on this call today as well. So join us July 7th. You should see that coming out soon, probably next week sometime. Until then, we thank everyone for their time and participation. And as always, if you have any feedback for us, definitely feel free to message myself or post it to the community group. But we hope everyone has a great weekend, and we'll talk to you on the next Office Hours.